Shadow Slave, Chapter 1165 Warmth of Affection, Novel Trust. Reading novel-free human homes were like a titan. They were full of countless things. From the floor panels to the smallest trivialities, each thing had been designed and created by someone. The materials used in the creation of the things had been produced by someone else. Vehicles that someone had assembled transported them over roads that someone had built. The amount of effort and life hiding in each human home was staggering. The scale of it was so inconceivable that Mordred could only compare it to something he was more familiar with, an abomination so vast that its mere existence was a calamity. But really, the waking world was so much more than that. The only creature it could truly be compared to was a god. A dead god, maybe. Humans were like ants, but he could easily imagine them as carrion worms wriggling as they feasted on a divine corpse. He could imagine it vividly. "Honey, come eat." Mordred was looking at the world through the child's eyes. He put down his toys and ran to the kitchen. He climbed on a chair and grinned at his mother. He made a face at the plate full of expensive, naturally grown vegetables and pouted. He allowed himself to be coaxed into eating some. "I can't taste it." Mordred felt a slight disappointment as he studied the mother's face. She was looking at him with a smile. Her eyes were brimming with affection. Being loved by someone was a novel feeling. But what would it feel like to love someone instead? Curious, Mordred thought about taking the mother's body and caring for the kid. Would it feel rewarding? Would it feel burdensome? Would it feel nice? There was an easy way to find out. However, Mordred stifled his curiosity and remained still. As the kid chewed on the vegetables, the mother idly listened to the news. There was a propaganda report on the screen, with a dignified male voice delivering a report. With the 2nd Evacuation Army en route to the southern quadrant, the heroic warriors of the 1st Evacuation Army are continuing to consolidate their forces on the continent. Just a few days ago, the relocation of refugees from the impregnable siege capital of Falcon Scott was successfully concluded. Under the valiant leadership of St. Tyrus of the White Feather Clan, the casualties among the rank and file of the army were minimal. Mordred smiled at the mention of a familiar name. Skytide was still alive, it seemed. He was satisfied. Among all the saints he wished to kill, she was the only one who deserved a clean death. She had indirectly helped him get caught. But she had also indirectly helped him escape. So, maybe I won't have to kill her at all. For the next few days, Mordred lived the life of a human child. He experienced the heat of summer, the warmth of being cared for by a loving mother, the delight of playing with friends, and the excitement of learning letters with a tutor. It was all fun, but he quickly grew bored. The other would have loved it, though. Feeling his mood turn dangerous at the thought, he chased it away. Mordred was sincere when he told the kid that he never felt sad. But he was not completely emotionless. There were things he could feel: satisfaction, contentment, pleasure, anger, resentment, contempt, and hatred, of course. And although he hated his traitorous father and Asterion, he hated the other the most. No sense in thinking about it. He focused his attention back on the present. The kid he dwelled within was rather stupid, as expected from a child. The child only saw the mother smile, but Mordred saw what was hidden behind it. Worry. Fatigue. Loneliness. Fear. After a few days of idle observation, he left the child and hid within the mother's eyes. Life was not all warmth and joy from her perspective. She put on a brave face when she was with her son, but when left alone, the woman allowed herself to be weak and scared. The city was in turmoil. Everything was changing. The distant war was already affecting the daily lives of the citizens. Her friends, her neighbors, her family, everyone was tense, as if waiting for a storm. Many people had left with the 1st Evacuation Army. Even more enlisted and sailed away with the 2nd. And now, there was talk of even people from her immediate circle being pulled into the whirlwind of the distant cataclysm. The woman was not a low-ranking citizen. Her status was special, and so, she knew better than to believe the propaganda. Mordred observed, absorbing her point of view. On one sunny morning, the woman received a call. Her face brightened as she brought the communicator to her ear. "Yes. I see. That is wonderful news. How long before? Oh. That soon. Yes, I understand. He is doing great. He misses you, of course. Don't worry. I'll explain. We are very proud of you. Can I come see you? Oh, that's wonderful. Yes. I'll be there. After finishing the call, the woman lowered her hands and remained motionless for a few moments. Her lips trembled. Then, she took a deep breath and put a calm expression on her face. The woman got ready, putting much more effort than usual into looking nice. Her already unmistakable beauty bloomed even more. After putting on her favorite dress, she smiled at herself in the mirror and left the apartment. Of course, Mordred, who was looking at the world through her eyes, did the same. How sweet. Instead of using public transportation, they summoned an expensive PTV and traveled to an even more luxurious and well-defended part of the city. There, at the very heart of NQSC, a vast complex that resembled a hybrid between an embassy and a fortress lay, large enough to be considered a district of its own. The woman exited the PTV and approached the security checkpoint. There, an awakened warrior wearing particular colors, black and vermilion, stopped her with a polite gesture. She smiled. Good morning. I am here to see my husband. Shadow Slave, Chapter 1166 Homecoming Novel Trust, reading novel free. The woman had no trouble passing the security checkpoint. Just like that, Mordred entered the stronghold of the great and powerful clan Valor. His birthplace. It felt fascinating to come back here. Mordred did not exactly consider this place his home, but he remembered it well. Not from when he had lived here during early childhood, but from the time he spent here right after coming back from the dream realm. He had been 12. Or was it 13? And already an awakened. Reaching Bastion first, and then coming to this beautiful place. Everything in the waking world had felt soft, but his return was not at all like he had imagined. As memories flashed in his mind, Mordred felt a dark, suffocating emotion rise from the depths of his soul. Now is not the time. Infiltrating the stronghold was already a risk. He could not allow himself to act rashly. His family were no fools. They had safeguards in place to detect him, and it had taken a lot of effort to make this moment possible. If there was one thing Mordred was good at, it was remaining cold and calculating. So, no matter how much he wanted to let go, he had to hold himself back. These people were not his enemies, anyway. They were just servants. The masters were safely hidden away behind much more impenetrable defenses. The child and the woman he had been observing for the past couple of weeks were not random people, of course. They were the son and the wife of an awakened retainer of the great clan Valor. Usually, a family like that would have resided within the fortress itself, but with the warrior spending most of his time in the dream realm, the woman wanted to live closer to her family. That was a vulnerability which Mordred had planned to exploit. And now, he was inside the complex, hiding in the woman's eyes as she hurried to meet her husband. She seemed to be familiar with the compound, easily navigating between the multitude of buildings, training grounds, and parks. The stronghold was perfectly maintained, picturesque, and tranquil. At least on the surface. Behind the beautiful facade, however, hid explosive tension. The woman did not seem worried about that. All she worried about was her husband. Mordred was touched. Love for her child, love for her partner. She is just full of affection, without a second thought. How peculiar. After spending some time with this family, he couldn't help but feel a little attached. Eventually, the woman made her way to a particular building. There, rows of sleeping pods were stationed in heavily defended rooms. There were some living quarters, as well, and that was where her husband was waiting. Upon seeing him, she beamed with joy. A bright smile appeared on the man's face, too. You're here. Without wasting any time, they embraced. The husband seemed like a nice enough fellow, if a little too earnest. As an awakened serving the great clan Valor, he had a lot of privileges, but also a lot of duties. Awakened retainers had to spend long months in the dream realm, protecting Bastion or one of the other citadels under Valor's control. Sometimes, they were sent on dangerous missions. Even though these were some of the best fighters of the human race, the dream realm was the dream realm. No one was safe there, least of all mere awakened. It was not a surprise that the woman's life was full of fear and worry. Poor thing. Their reunion was sweet, but sadly brief. Even though the awakened had just returned to the waking world, he was not coming home. Instead, he was preparing to embark on a new mission. Mordred listened with a faint smile. It is a great honor. And opportunity, of course. Saint Madoc himself is coming with us. Even Lady Morgan will be there. If I can distinguish myself in front of them, then even receiving the support of the elders to become a knight won't be out of the question. You know that I am well respected among the men. All I need is one last push. Can you imagine how our lives will change if I ascend? I won't be gone that often, too. The woman smiled, but Mordred could feel her apprehension. She hid it well, though, not wanting to burden her husband. Of course. Of course. Just be careful, okay? I hear terrible things about Antarctica. The men smiled. Why are you comparing us to those pitiful dogs? The people serving the government can barely be called awakened. But we are the warriors of valor. Mordred was delighted. He had thought that he would have to jump between dozens of people to find someone assigned to the Southern Quadrant Expedition Force. How lucky was he to stumble on a suitable person so soon? From the son, to the mother, to the father. It was so quick. The awakened and his wife talked, expressing their affection for each other. But then, inevitably, they had to part ways. When the beautiful woman left to return to her child, Mordred remained in the man's eyes. He was going to Antarctica. For the next several weeks, he remained hidden in the awakened warrior's eyes, perceiving the world through them. He trained. He prepared. He thought about his wife and his son. Slowly but surely, the expedition force was gathered and readied itself to go to war. The summer ended, and autumn embraced the world. The man was excited, but also nervous. He steeled himself to what was about to come. Mordred did, too. On the day when they were supposed to embark on the journey across the ocean, he prayed to the dead gods. Then, knowing that there might not be an opportunity to do so later, he sent a sweet message to his wife. Finally, he saluted Saint Gilead, the summer night, and followed the noble transcendent onto a ship. This man has a beautiful wife, and a cute son. He truly is fortunate. Mordred remembered the days he had lived in the awakened warrior's home with fondness. On the first night at sea, he snuffed out the man's soul, and took his place. Shadow Slave, Chapter 1167 Prince's New Clothes, Novel Trust, reading novel free. Taking someone's place was not a new experience for Mordred. However, it was a perilous thing every time. Not that he minded. He had been very weak at the start of it all. Unlike most other members of his family, Mordred had not received an aspect that helped one in a direct confrontation. He was not like his father, his uncles and aunts, or his cousins. He was not like Morgan, who had been born on the battlefield and was made stronger, faster, and more resilient after awakening. He was not even on par with that amusing scoundrel, Sunless. His physical strength was, objectively, laughable. It had gotten somewhat better now that Mordred reached a higher class, but that was his limit. That level was not nearly enough to face the caliber of threats he was facing, and there was no other way to bolster his combat prowess without the use of memories. However, he could not use memories within someone's soul. He could only reflect what was already there. As a sleeper, Mordred had been able to see through reflections, as well as travel through them, both mentally and physically. He had also been gifted with the ability to create helpers by shattering his soul. Of course, back then, gaining a new soul core to create a reflection had not been easy. Mirror Beast. Beastie was his first creation. Human children had imaginary friends, but Mordred had Beastie instead. For a lonely child who had grown up in the dream realm, having a companion, even if it was a mindless dormant beast at first, was meaningful beyond words. His mirror beast was gone now, though. That was another thing his family had to pay for. In any case, things had changed after he awakened by anchoring himself to a citadel. Mordred had received his second ability, which made people wary of him. Among other things. That was because he could enter their souls through their eyes, and destroy them. The problem was that he had to defeat the soul first. During a soul battle, Mordred could rely only on his own prowess and on reflecting the power of the soul he was invading. Defeat meant death, even for him, just like he had almost perished when trying to take the body of Sunless. Ah, what a thrilling memory that was. Mordred's aspect was of no help in a battle, while the awakened whose souls he invaded generally possessed a great mastery of their aspects and tools. He, on the other hand, had no experience using them. So, to win and survive, Mordred had to gain a better understanding of the enemy's power than the enemy possessed, usually in a matter of seconds. It was like giving a novice a sharp sword and sending them into a duel to the death against a veteran swordsman who had been honing their skill for many years. The corrupted souls of nightmare creatures were even more deadly, albeit for other reasons. So, how did he win? By being better. By being smarter, by having greater skill, by possessing a deeper understanding of combat. By breaking and manipulating his opponent, dismantling their confidence, and turning their strengths against them. There was no trick to it, just will. It was not easy. And yet, Mordred had not perished yet. Oh, and it was also fun. The best way to win a soul battle, however, was to prepare. If he created an opportunity to study the enemy in advance, to learn the details and intricacies of their aspect, then he did not have to enter a soul battle blindly. It was even better if he had managed to shake the enemy, making their soul weaker. So, taking the body of the awakened warrior after boarding the ship had not been too hard. Mordred had been looking at the world through his eyes for weeks, after all. He even knew the names and faces of his wife and son. Actually, he might have known those two better than the man himself did. That's better. Looking at the face of the man in the mirror, Mordred smiled. Then, he erased that smile and replaced it with another, much more earnest and bright one. That was how the man had smiled. Mordred effortlessly changed his posture, his facial expression, the glint in his eyes, the subtle tension in his shoulders. His whole presence changed, becoming indistinguishable from how the dead man had held himself. Looking into the mirror with that new smile on his face, Mordred whispered with flawless sincerity, "Glory to the great clan Valor." Mordred enjoyed a journey across the sea in the company of the other awakened warriors of valor. He trained, ate, and spent the rest of his time with these people. He liked them a lot. The stoic awakened Crass, the good-natured awakened Agath, the carefree awakened Vero, and the other members of his cohort. The sense of camaraderie they shared was curious and delightful. The respect and admiration they felt toward the men whose body Mordred was wearing was refreshing, too. It made him feel a bit of responsibility for these people, which was a novel experience. Even St. Gilead was not unpleasant to be around. I wonder how things are going in the southern quadrant. By now, the emissaries of Song had already arrived there. Sishan's bloodbag, Bast, must have already begun producing the mirrors. There was no real point to those mirrors, of course. It was just something senseless Mordred had instructed them to do, in order to add fuel to the flame of his family's suspicion. The man was most likely going to be eliminated, at some point, but that was no great loss to the great clan Song. Why would Mordred care? Then, finally, a dark line appeared on the horizon. The convoy had reached Antarctica. Standing on the deck of a massive battleship, Mordred looked at the gray sky and felt the cold wind caressing his face. The call of nightmare assaulted his mind, filling it with a cacophony of maddening whispers. He sighed. What a dreary place. As he contemplated the view in front of him, a familiar voice called out, "Warren. Get ready. We are docking in half an hour." Turning around, he looked at his comrades and smiled. "Don't be foolish, Agath. A warrior of valor is always ready."